to set your lineups for week 10, and we are focusing on the tight end position. These are the playmakers that can make all the difference in a win or a loss in your fantasy matchup. SI's fantasy analyst Michael Fabiano is here to shed some light on this position. Fabs, tight ends that fantasy managers want to get in their lineup this week, who are they?
Let's start with TJ Hawkinson, who's been very consistent. I mean, his floor is right around 9 fantasy points. He's averaging nearly 13 points per game. And we saw him last week score another touchdown. No Kenny Galladay, so there were more targets. And Washington has allowed the 6th most fantasy points to tight ends this year, so Hawkinson should remain in your lineup. And then Dallas Goedert. Now, he played before the Eagles' bye, and he wasn't very good, but I still see him as a #1 tight end as long as Zach Ertz is out due to injury. Keep in mind, Carson Wentz is second among quarterbacks in targeting tight ends at more than 10 pass attempts per game to that position. The Giants have allowed 13-plus fantasy points to 3 tight ends in their last 4 games, including Richard Rodgers, who replaced Goddard back in Week 8. So Goddard needs to be in fantasy lineups this week. He is a top 10 tight end.
All right, awesome. Also on the stardom list is Austin Hooper and Eric Ebron. But Fabs, who are the tight ends that should remain on your bench this week?
Hunter Henry's been a huge disappointment lately. He's failed to score more than 7.3 fantasy points in 3 straight games. He's also failed to produce more than 4 catches in 5 straight games. And the Dolphins have allowed only 3 touchdowns and the 7th fewest fantasy points to tight ends. And Kaitlin, not a single tight end has scored more than 9.1 fantasy points against Miami. So Hunter Henry is a tough sell for me this week. And then Jared Cook last week only had 3 targets, right? Michael Thomas was back. Emmanuel Sanders was back. More mouths to feed. Cook had just 3 fantasy points. The matchup's not great this week either. The Niners have allowed the 3rd fewest fantasy points to tight ends, and only 1 tight end has scored more than 8.6 fantasy points in a game against them. So Cook is a fade for me in week 10.
Well, fantasy managers should also steer clear of Jimmy Graham, who takes on the Minnesota Vikings, and Tyler Higbee, who faces the Seahawks. Fabs, great insight as always. For more of Sports Illustrated's award-winning weekly player rankings, get your membership to SI Fantasy Plus for just $14.99 a month.